My name is Eleanor Vance. For 84 years, I believed I was teaching children how to read books. I was wrong. I was teaching them how to survive heartbreak, how to believe in themselves when no one else did, and sometimes how to keep living when life felt impossible. Today, at 84 years old, I walked onto my school campus for the very last time. I thought I was simply saying goodbye to a classroom. I never imagined that. Before the day was over, one final lesson, it would leave an entire school in tears. And somehow, it would change my life forever. It changed the way I understood teaching and the way I understood life. It was a cool October morning. A gentle autumn breeze drifted across the campus of Oak Ridge High School, carrying the scent of pine trees and fallen leaves. Golden sunlight filtered through the tall oaks, painting the walkways in shades of amber and gold. I had seen this campus thousands of times over the past 60 years. Yet that morning, it felt completely different. Because I knew something no one else could truly understand. It was the last time I would ever walk through those gates as a teacher. At 84 years old, I held my silver-headed cane in one hand and slowly made my way toward the front entrance. Every step echoed softly against the old stone pathway. I wasn't walking because I was weak. I was walking slowly because every corner of that school carried a memory I wasn't ready to leave behind. Those old brick walls had watched me grow from a nervous 24-year-old teacher into an old woman whose entire life had been shaped inside those classrooms. I paused at the bottom of the front steps and looked up at the school building. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My eyes quietly filled with tears. Not because I was afraid of retirement, but because I was saying goodbye to the place that had been my second home for 6 decades. I gently placed my hand on the cold brass door handle. The metal felt exactly the same as it had 60 years earlier. I closed my eyes for a moment, took a slow breath, and whispered to myself, "One last day, Eleanor." Then I opened the door and stepped inside, unaware that before the sun set, this ordinary school day would become the most unforgettable day of my entire life. The hallways were unusually quiet. Most of the students were still outside, laughing with friends before the first bell. Their voices drifted faintly through the open windows, blending with the rustling autumn leaves. I smiled. That sound had been the heartbeat of this school for as long as I could remember. Slowly, I walked toward room 204, the same classroom where I had spent nearly 6 decades teaching English literature. The brass room number was slightly faded now. The blue paint around the doorway had chipped with age. Yet to me, it was the most beautiful room in the world. I pushed the door open. The familiar scent of old books, polished wooden desks, and freshly sharpened pencils welcomed me like an old friend. Everything was exactly where it had always been. Rows of desks, the chalkboard, the teacher's desk by the window, the old bookshelf that had grown fuller every year because former students kept donating their favorite novels. I slowly walked to the front of the classroom. For a long moment, I simply stood there in silence. Then I gently rested my hand on the teacher's desk. Thousands of lessons had begun from this very spot. Thousands of young faces had looked back at me from those desks. Some had become doctors, some had become firefighters, some had become parents, some I never saw again. Yet every single one had left a small piece of themselves inside this room. And without realizing it, they had left a piece inside my heart too. The final school bell echoed softly through the hallway. For a moment, I closed my eyes. It sounded exactly the way it had on my very first day as a teacher. I smiled. Some sounds never grow old. I walked slowly toward the windows that overlooked the playground. The swings moved gently in the afternoon breeze. A group of children laughed as they chased one another across the grass. Their laughter filled the air with the same excitement I had heard year after year. Generations had changed. Technology had changed. The world had changed. But the joy of childhood had remained exactly the same. I realized something then. Schools are never truly made of bricks and walls. They are built from dreams. Every child who walks through those doors carries a future no one can fully imagine. And every teacher quietly helps shape that future, one lesson at a time. As I stood there, sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, covering the desks in a warm golden glow. It reminded me of something I used to tell every new class on the very first day of school. Grades will open doors for you. Knowledge will guide you, but kindness is what people will remember. Some students would smile. Some would nod politely. Some probably forgot those words before the bell even rang. But every now and then, years later, someone would stop me in a grocery store, at an airport, or on a quiet street. They would smile and say, "Mrs. Vance, I still remember what you taught me." And every single time, I realized they were never talking about grammar. They were talking about patience, about compassion, about believing in themselves when no one else did. Those were the lessons that stayed with them. And somehow, They stayed with me too. I glanced once more around the classroom. The empty chairs no longer felt empty. They were filled with memories. Every laugh, every question, every success, every mistake, every dream that had quietly begun within these walls. I took one last deep breath. Then I picked up the small cardboard box that held the last few things from my desk. A fountain pen, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, a stack of handwritten letters from former students, and a tiny apple-shaped paperweight given to me by a shy little girl more than 30 years ago. I picked it up carefully. Its red paint had faded long ago, but the words written underneath were still perfectly clear. Thank you for believing in me. I smiled through tears. Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest meaning. I looked around the room one final time, not to say goodbye, but to say thank you. Thank you for every lesson, every challenge, every unexpected moment that made me a better teacher and a better person. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of a teacher who changed your life, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing inspiring stories that celebrate kindness, hope, and the people who make a difference. As I reached for the light switch beside the door, I paused. One last time, I turned back and looked across the classroom. The afternoon sunlight rested gently on every desk. For just a second, it almost felt as though the room was waiting for another lesson to begin. I smiled softly. Perhaps, in a way, it always would. I quietly turned off the classroom lights. The room grew still. But it didn't feel empty. It felt complete. Some chapters end, not because the story is over, but because their purpose has been fulfilled. I stepped into the hallway and gently closed the classroom door behind me. I didn't know if I would ever stand inside that room again. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. A teacher never truly leaves the classroom, because a part of them lives on in every student whose life they helped change. And as I walked down that hallway for the final time, I carried every memory, every lesson, and every student with me. Because teaching was never just a job. It was a piece of my heart that I shared with the world. And as I walked away from that school for the final time, I carried more than memories. I carried the smiles, the questions, and the dreams of every student who had ever sat in my classroom. And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. A teacher's greatest legacy is never written on a certificate. It is written in the lives they help shape. And that is a lesson that will continue long after the final school bell has rung. I realized then, no teacher ever finishes every lesson. We simply leave behind unfinished pages for the next generation to write. Years may pass, classrooms may change, and new faces may fill those desks. But the power of a kind word and a caring teacher will always remain. Somewhere, right now, a former student is sharing a lesson, showing kindness, or inspiring someone else. And maybe that is the greatest success a teacher can ever achieve. Not awards, not wealth, not recognition, but knowing that somewhere, a child you once believed in has grown into someone who now believes in others. That afternoon, the school auditorium slowly became quiet. The applause faded, the music stopped, but no one wanted to leave. Former students gathered throughout the auditorium, quietly reconnecting after years apart. Old friends embraced as if no time had passed at all. Conversations filled the room with gratitude and memories that had waited decades to be shared. One by one, they made their way toward Eleanor. A young doctor thanked her for believing in him when no one else did. A firefighter smiled and said her encouragement had given him the courage to chase his dream. A business owner admitted that one sentence she had spoken decades earlier had changed the direction of his entire life. Every story was different, but every one of them began with the same person. Eleanor looked around the room, her eyes slowly filling with tears. For the first time in many years, she didn't see successful adults. She saw the little children who had once walked into her classroom, frightened, uncertain, and full of dreams. in that quiet moment. She realized that every lesson, every encouraging word, and every act of kindness had never been forgotten. Then, without saying a word, a little girl, no older than 8, stepped forward from the crowd. She was the granddaughter of one of Eleanor's former students. She held out a single white rose and softly said, "My mommy told me you taught her how to be kind." That one sentence meant more to Eleanor than every award she had ever received. If Mrs. Eleanor Brooks' story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories that remind the world kindness still matters. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.